Alright everyone, welcome back to my lab. So this here in front of me is a 6.1 Listeroid diesel engine. It's basically a replication of the old English Lister diesel engines. It looks like an antique, but it's actually only like 14 years old. It's fairly new. We use it here at the ranch to charge batteries and stuff, like when there's no solar or wind. It doesn't run that often, but you know, it's been working for us for quite some time. It's a really cool engine. Definitely think about doing a video on it specifically at some point, but not today. Today, I've got a bag of these super strong neodymium magnets, and I've been itching to stick them to the flywheel and see what kind of cool sciencey stuff we can do from a ring of spinning magnets. Now, of course, for safety, we should check to make sure that the magnets can actually stick. So let's put them on here. Let's spread them out so it's a little bit balanced. The flywheels are actually self-balancing a little bit, so it doesn't really matter, but it's probably a good idea anyway. Okay, I don't think the magnets are going to come off. This only rotates at about 600 RPM, 10 revolutions per second. It's a 27-inch flywheel. I'm sure somebody can figure out what the G-forces are there, but they're not particularly large. Anyway, to start it, we got a hand crank. We never put a starter on there. Never needed it, because it starts super easy. See, just turn on the fuel there, get it turning over, and then open the valves, or drop the valves, and then it's going. See? I gotta stay over here in case the magnets fly off. There we are, we're up to speed. The magnets seem to be doing just fine. Turn off the fuel. Like that. And let it come to a stop. So much more easy to start than the Model T over there. Model T starts the same way, but you really have to sit and crank it. The first thing I wanted to try was to make a crude electrical generator. To do this, all I need is a coil of wire, which I made by wrapping a long piece of copper wire around a bolt, gluing the coils with super glue so they don't come apart, and then removing it from the bolt. I then attached 2 LED lights to the coil so we can observe the electricity that's being produced. So I've got a blue and a white, and they are reverse of each other. And the reason for that is the electrical current that will be produced is alternating. So when the magnetic field is starting, so when the magnet is coming across the coil, apparently those are iron, it'll induce an electric current in the coil going one way, and then as the magnet's leaving, it'll create a current going the other way. So one way the white light bulb will light up, and the other way the blue one will. Okay, there we go. The engine's running. I've got magnets flying past at freeway speeds. Let's see what happens when we carefully put the coil of wire underneath where the magnets are flying. And nothing. The lights did not illuminate. What's wrong? So there was an electric current being induced in this coil. The problem is it wasn't very strong. But there's a pretty easy way to make it much more efficient. And that is to replace the bolt. So pull this out so we can work on it. Stick the bolt up through. this board. There we go. And put the coil back on the bolt. Now, what the iron does is it's ferromagnetic. It basically becomes a magnet when you put in an external magnetic field. This amplifies the magnetic field and essentially directs it. So instead of having the magnetic field go across the top, it forces it to go down through the windings. And that is what is really important for making the electrical power. See, it's basically like you're making an electromagnet, except in reverse, using the magnet to produce the electricity. Of course, just putting the magnet here isn't going to make power. That would violate conservation of energy. The magnetic field has to be changing. And the faster the magnetic field changes, the more power that will be produced. Alright, start the engine. There we go, we got some flashing lights. Nice. We are at full speed. See, both lights are flashing. And they flash as the magnet goes past. Let me get the high-speed camera out and let's see if we can get a better shot of this. So we run the video forward. You can see the flywheel's turning. The magnet comes near the coil. You can see the blue light illuminates, and then as the magnet crosses over and starts to leave, the blue light goes out and the white light turns on. And then as the magnet leaves, both lights go out because there's no more electrical current. And we run it forward to the other magnet. It's right there. Now watch this. White and then blue. Because this magnet has a different orientation. So now, let's see what happens when we put on the rest of the magnets and make a complete ring around the entire flywheel. Now, how did I get that lucky? Look at that. It's a perfect fit. 326 of these very strong neodymium magnets stuck onto the flywheel. They're arranged north, south, north, south. Alright, well, let's start it up and see what it does to those little LEDs. Yeah, now that I think about it, the magnetic field is going to be changing twice as much because we're going from north all the way to south rather than just from 0 to north. So it might actually burn the lights out. But here we go. They're on. Making a whirring noise. It's like the lights are... Oh, the blue one just burned out. Well, the white one burned out too. Just as soon as I got the high-speed camera online. I'll see if I can wire in another one or something. So I found a pretty simple workaround. You see, if I just move the coil away from the magnets, the voltage drops. So the lights don't burn out. I can adjust it. Nice. Get the camera going on it. That was pretty fun. And now I've got a little light that lights up when the engine's running. How cute. On that last shot I was filming at 8,000 frames per second to get a good video of them blinking. As you know, these magnets were going by quite rapidly. So I needed the high frame rate. But anyway, moving on with the science here. What would happen if I took this coil of wire, which is quite warm, and shorted out all the windings? Maybe got it even warmer and melted into a blob of metal. You know, something like a bullet here. Well, it would still actually induce current. The currents would not be as useful, I wouldn't be able to plug in a light and get it to light up, but the currents would still occur. So let's see what happens when I put a solid piece of metal next to these moving magnets. So here's one of the silver bullets that Grant Thompson and I made. When I place it next to the spinning magnets, the first thing I notice is a strong drag force pulling the bullet along with the magnets. This is the same force that caused the coins to slow down in my coin sorter. Essentially, conductive materials require work in order to move through a magnetic field due to electrical eddy currents that are generated in the metal that take energy to create. The second force that is very noticeable is the torque that's being put on the bullet. It wants to spin. I can show this better by placing a foil ball inside of a test tube. The ball rotates quite rapidly. And what's causing this is simply that the magnetic field is stronger near the magnets. The third force, which I found quite interesting, is a repulsive effect that's pushing the metal away from the magnets. This is caused by the electrical currents generating a magnetic field on their own, which mirrors the external magnetic field, and since like poles repel, the piece of metal is able to levitate. The final effect that I will talk about is the fact that the piece of conductive metal actually heats up in this changing magnetic field. The reason for this is the fact that the electrical currents rapidly dissipate, turning into heat due to the resistances of the metal. Let's go back to a coin and see how hot we can get it using this setup.
Okay, how about now? Ready here?
After using the magnets to successfully heat a copper penny enough to melt solder, I got the idea in my head to try to melt a bullet. So I was having a lot of trouble holding the bullet in the correct place for long enough using the pliers. And besides, the pliers were pulling the heat out of the bullet, keeping it from reaching high temperatures. So let's try mounting it just like on a piece of wood here. Like carve a little indentation for the bullet to sit so it can ride along the magnets. Okay, you can hear the shot balance flywheel. That's what that rattling noise is. Oh, see that right there? That's why I was going slow. The bullet wants to jump out. It's trying to turn, that's what's going on. Well, so I've tied the bullet down with some copper wire. Let's see if that works. Let's spin this up. Seems all right. Well, let's start the engine. It's going. It's hot, but it didn't melt the lead. Handling the bullet after taking it away from the magnets, I estimate that the highest temperature that it achieved was only a little bit above 100 degrees Celsius. Like, I put some spit on there and the spit was able to boil, but it didn't sizzle. So, hot enough to burn you, but just nowhere close to actually melting the lead core. I needed another 200 degrees Celsius to do that. Now, why was that the case? Why was the penny able to melt the lead-based solder, whereas the bullet, which very similar configuration of the copper and the lead, wasn't able to melt? Well, first of all, the solder was actually a lead tin alloy, which has a slightly lower melting point than the lead, so it's a little bit easier to melt. But I think the biggest issue is the fact that the penny was a lot thicker, much thicker copper. You see, this bullet here that's been broke apart, so I can see the thickness of the copper jacket, it's only like 1/3 of a millimeter thick. Now, if you've ever torn apart a transformer, you'll know that the iron core that directs the magnetic field through the windings is usually made out of thin metal plates, thin leaves of steel, instead of a solid block. Now, partly that's so that it's easier to manufacture, but it's also to limit the thickness of the metal that the eddy currents can develop in. So the thicker the metal, the more voltage potential you can generate across it, and the more inductive heating you will have. So making thin metal pieces reduces your inductive losses. It also means that thin pieces of metal are harder to heat. Now, the lead itself is quite thick. This is a .45 caliber bullet, but also its electrical conductivity is very low. It's like 1/10 that of copper. Plus, it drops dramatically as you heat it. So the lead isn't contributing to heating very much, and the copper jacket isn't contributing very much either. So the total heating before the wind of the flywheel is able to take away more heat than is being added is ended up being around 100 degrees Celsius, much lower than we needed. There's a few things I could do, maybe. Stronger, faster magnets is always an option, but I think for now, in this video, we're just going to cheat a little bit. Let's just replace the lead with something easier to melt, so we can still see a bullet melting, but it just won't have to get as hot. So, well, first of all, I've got a blowtorch here. We can melt the lead. That's more like it. Okay, to replace the lead, we're going to make Field's metal. So this alloy calls for 50% indium, 30% bismuth, and about 15% tin. Those numbers are not exact, but they don't really need to be. So let's just zap this with some heat. This metal alloy has about the same melting point as candle wax, so it's very easy to handle. Anyway, let's fill up the bullet. Oh, might need a little bit more metal. Got some more made up here. Just break a piece off. So there you have it, a bullet, or at least something that could technically be used as a bullet, melting, well, partially, using magnets. Well, hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.